Revelation 2770. From the 10th of June 1943. Connection of God with His creatures and creations. The Spirit, who is from eternity, takes part in the smallest events in the entire universe. He is infinitely great, and yet the smallest is close to Him. He is unimaginable in His love and goodness, in His strength and power. He is perfect, and perfection inclines towards the tiniest, otherwise it would be a lack of love, and every lack proves imperfection. For even the tiniest is His creation, even the tiniest emerged from His eternal strength of love and also remains eternally in His love. And it is this greater than great love of His which does not allow for separation, and, if His created being strives for this itself, He lets the latter, seemingly isolated in creation, recognize the lack of strength and power which the separation from God entails, so that it then tries to rejoin God of its own accord. Nevertheless, the connection with God always and forever remains, only not recognized by the being wanting to separate. And this is already a sign that the human being, that is, the being in the state of free will, no longer has any connection with God of its own accord. This is a state of complete ignorance, a state of imperfection, for the more perfect the human being is, the more God-connected he feels. He undoubtedly belongs to God because he is also in realization. And as soon as he feels that he belongs to God, he also understands the connection of every work of creation with God, for he sees everything as God's will which has become form, who did not arbitrarily let something come into being but created and shaped it in the most wise planning and gave the created a goal and purpose. Consequently, he will constantly take care of his creations and creations. He will gather the tiniest creations whirring around in the universe and unite them again for their final purpose. He will not leave the tiniest creature unnoticed, otherwise he could not be called perfect, otherwise he would not be love. But people who are distant from God neither recognize God's love and wisdom nor His perfection, because these would have to be related to a being and they lack faith in a supremely perfect being. They believe themselves to be far from God, they deny any connection and now also try to explain everything with their view. And consequently, as people distant from God, they will also be distant from knowledge, from realization, for God and truth are one, and the human being can only be guided into realization if pure truth is imparted to him. Hence he does not know the purpose and goal of creation and consequently sees everything as completely isolated in the universe which is not subject to a higher will. Thus he does not recognize any connection between the Creator and the created works. And thus they also lack any belief in an essential creative power, for a being to which will and wisdom are attributed would also have to be granted a planned, purposeful creation, which, however, also requires a constant contact of the created with its creator. For even the creating, active human being will seek to improve his creations until they fulfill the purpose intended for them. And as long as this is the case, the creator cannot isolate himself from the created. All visible creations in the universe are shells of imperfect entities which strove away from God, were banished in their individual substances in matter, in the solid form, and now have to cover the earthly path in order to attain liberation from this form, that is, to strive towards God again from whom they believed they could distance themselves. And each of these bound beings looks after God with infinite care on this endlessly long earthly path of life. Nothing is too small and too insignificant for him not to take hold of it with his love. But he cares all the more for every human being. He directs every single destiny. His will precedes every event, and without his will or his permission nothing can happen. Without his will or his permission nothing can dissolve or get lost as long as its course of development is not yet finished. Amen.